Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. What? You say my hat's not right? Oh, okay. Yeah, let me fix it. Okay, here we go. Okay, is that better? Bam. Okay, cool. We good. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so what I have for you guys right now is the game Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, the Frenchman versus Wesley of the United States in the Champions Chess Tour. It's the second event, so it's the Airthings Open. And as always, if you guys appreciate my content, go ahead and subscribe. Come on, work. Subscribe right there, all the way here, everywhere, wherever the subscribe button is, just hit it. Thank you very much, guys. You guys have been watching my stuff, subscribing. I really appreciate everybody, taking a chance, because I'm fairly new to YouTube. So, people don't really know me. I'm not like Hikaru or Gotham Chess or, John Bartholomew, but, I hope to be there at some point one day. And as always, at the very end, I have the chess puzzles for you, the answer to the previous one and the next one. But if you guys are ready to go, I'm ready to go. Let's see what we got. Cool. So we have E4, got E5. So knight to F3, knight to C6, bishop to B5. We have A6, and we have bishop to A4. Now, as you guys know before, this is Morphy's way of dealing with this. So for those of you who don't know, do some research, know your chess history, look up Paul Morphy. He was the, arguably the greatest chess player in the mid 1800s before he, kind of pulled a Bobby Fischer and got ghost. And so, like I said, this is the Ruy Lopez Morphy variation. And so we have knight to F6. We have castles. So bishop to E7. So we got rook to E1. Now defending that pawn. Now before, we were, if we go back here, we weren't trying to take here because, we were going to see rook to E1. We were going to see D4 first, followed by rook to E1, exploiting the fact that this knight is pinned to the king. But after bishop to E7, that is no longer valid. So now we have to defend the pawn either by, knight to C3 or, D3, rook E1, like Maxime Vachier-Lagrave does. So we have B5, just kicking that bishop back. So we have bishop to B3. So castles by black. We have A4 by white. B4, we have A5. And as you guys can see, if black isn't careful, this pawn is going to become pretty weak, because as you can see, the A pawn doesn't have the ability to protect it, and the knight is blocking this C pawn. So it takes some movements for you to get into that position there. So we see D6, D3, so bishop to E6. And so we have trades on E6, bishop takes E6, pawn takes E6, which does create a little bit of a weakness in black's camp. For those of you that play Sicilians, this pawn is definitely down here, but, sometimes when you have this D and E5, this D6, E5 setup, and you develop a bishop to E6, you'll run into these types of positions. All right, so we have knight B to D2, and we have queen to C8, and so we have C3. Now, C3 is a move that has been played before in conjunction with rook to B8. And if we just back up a touch here, one of the other moves that was actually played was knight to C4. And we saw rook to come to B8, and then we saw bishop to G5. Now, this was a game that was played in 2007 between Vasily Ivanchuk and Vladimir Kramnik. So for those of you who aren't familiar with, Vasily Ivanchuk, he has been the Blitz and Rapid World Champion at one point. He's never been able to win the actual classical World Championship, but he's probably the strongest player to never do so. He's beaten all the top guys. There was a famous clip on YouTube where he missed checkmate in one versus Viswanathan Anand. If you haven't seen it, you need to take a look at it, man. It's hilarious. It's not. It sucks that you missed checkmate in one, but the commentators Daniel King and Maurice Ashley, they were just in complete shock. They were like, "Why doesn't he just take the king in the rook in the corner? Isn't that just mate? Are we missing something?" I'm gonna actually make sure I find that video and put it down in the description so you can see what I'm talking about. I've seen it like 50 times. Anyway, backing up to what we had. We did have queen come to C8. We had C3. We had rook to B8. So knight came to c4. So it's pretty similar what we had, but it's a little bit different. And so we have rook to b5, bishop to d2. We have knight to d7. So we have d4, b takes c3, b takes c3, queen to e8. So pawn takes e5, knight takes e5, knight c takes e5, knight takes e5, and we have knight to d4. And so like I said before, when I was talking about the Sicilians, you know, this pawn is fairly weak. It's not super weak, but it's weak. Sometimes it can just drop. But as you can see, we have a double attack going with the rook and the pawn. And you are not going to care about a pawn if your rook is attacked. So we see rook down to b2, which is the most active move for it. Because, you know, we always want to try to get these rooks on the 7th. We call them pig on the 7th. And so they're always most effective when they're up there, you know, restricting the movement of the king and stuff like that. So we see knight takes e6. And if you want to go ahead and stop the video here and see what black played, it's a really nice idea. And it does cause white a little bit of trouble here. So like I said, go ahead and pause it real quick and see if you could find what black actually played here. All right, cool. So for those of you who thought it was moving the rook, you kind of have a good idea. Like it's not, that wasn't a bad move, but it was going to be a passive move. Because you probably would have moved rook down or something like that, you know, because you do see that it is attacked. What was actually played in the game is knight to f3 but check. Now, it might look kind of strange at first because you're like, well, you know, wait a minute. I'm just like, you're just giving the knight away, right? Nah, because after pawn takes f3, you're going to see queen to g6 with check. And then that exploits the fact that this knight is undefended. So we see rook to h1. And then now we're seeing the picking up of the knight there on e6. And I didn't look at it, but I'm not really sure why the bishop wasn't thrown. Let's take a look at it real quick while we're in the video. So if knight comes back here, that would probably just be rook takes here and then the queen. Oh no, because the bishop is there. That's true. Okay, cool. You guys just saw me do like a live, like kind of, you know, little look at it. I've never done that before, but there's not I don't see everything in the game. You know, I'm not playing these games myself. So, you know, I do miss things too. You know, I'm not like a world champion. I'm not Stockfish. Anyway, like I said, going back to what we had, the queen did take on e6 and we have rook to g1. And so bishop comes to f6 and we see bishop to e3. And so we see bishop to e5. And some of you guys might have been wondering, you know, like, why didn't we just take the pawn on c3? I mean, it actually is available to take. So it's not a bad move. It is much stronger to not take, to just kind of like lodge the bishop here on e5. But if we take a look and see what that variation would have looked like, we would see bishop takes c3. We see rook to c1, you know, x-raying through the bishop and attacking this pawn on c7. And we would see rook to b3, or you can even see queen to b3. Queen would come to d3. We'd see bishop to b2, and we'd see queen to c4. And as you can see, you're able to exploit the fact that this queen is undefended, and it is you're kind of breaking the connection between the queen and the rook, and so the queen is going to be forced to take in this situation. But like I said, we do have bishop to e5, and so we see rook to g2, and the same idea is there even now. And you know, if black was to take on c3, and so we see queen to f7, and so we see bishop to d4, and we see queen takes f3. And we see bishop takes e5. And we throw a little intermezzo in there with the queen taking on d1. So we see rook takes d1. We see bishop takes, or pawn takes e5. Now, if we go back to where bishop d4 was played, it was slightly stronger to actually, instead of just automatically taking the pawn, which the pawn is just going to be sitting there. It's always, you know, going to be takeable. G6 was actually a good, a nice strong move. And the reason being this, a lot of times when I talk to you guys, I tell you about like the weaknesses that you have around your king, you know, when you're making pawn moves. But the problem is white doesn't really have a good way to exploit that because number one, their pawn is attacked, right? Doubly. And also this bishop is going to force a trade with this bishop if the bishop does try to, you know, influence that diagonal. So you don't really have a way to penetrate, and you don't have a way to exploit the dark squares in this particular one. So you would probably see bishop takes e5, pawn takes e5, queen to f1, and queen would take f3. And as you can see, compared to the position that we have in the game, this is much stronger because, you know, this rook is pinned. This pawn is under fire. And, you know, you probably have to do something like move the king over. This pawn is under attack. And so you can see it causes quite a few problems for white here. And so going back, so it would have been interesting to kind of see what that would have looked like if that would have been played in the game. So we see, like I said, we see d takes e5. We see rook to d7, threatening that pawn on g7. So we see rook down to f7. So rook to d8 with check, rook back to f8. Rook to d7, threatening the same thing again. So we have rook back to f7, rook to d8 with check, rook back to f8, and we see rook to d7. And it's actually in this position that the players, they reach a draw by threefold repetition. So in the, I believe this was the 8th round, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check. Yes, round 8. Yeah, so so Wesley won one of his games out of the day, and he drew the rest of them. And so you know, we already have the bracket. We already have the bracket for the knockout portion because this was the prelims, and so we had a lot of players that did get eliminated, and so we are down to 8 now for the semifinal. Then that'll let us know what we have for the actual final. Or I think it's the semifinal, then the quarterfinal. Yeah, or quarterfinal, something like that. I don't know how it goes. I'll find out though. Anyway, I appreciate you guys coming through. And like I'm gonna say to you know, all my Philippine people that come and watch the video, Salamat. You know, I appreciate you guys coming through and watching my stuff. And merci beaucoup, mon ami, to all of my people in France that might come through and watch, because you know, we do have a French and American / Filipino person playing the game. Okay, so let's get into these chess puzzles here. So this was the puzzle I gave you guys last time, and this was a double attack. And like I said before, the things that you really should be paying attention to is the fact this bishop is undefended, and this queen is undefended as well. And this was, I mean, for me personally, it wasn't that easy to find, but the move is knight to d5. And what it does is it actually sets up a trap for the queen, because before with the knight here, this pawn was able to be grabbed. Now it's not. And so all you need to do is shift these rooks over, and the queen is trapped. So you have to avoid that. So you got queen to a6. You see rook coming to a1. And so you see the bishop blocking. And so you're giving up the bishop here on e7. After rook moves to e8, you have b5. And after the queen takes on b5, you have queen to d6 with check. So king goes to a8. And you have e5, discovering an attack here on this, let me draw the thing, right, on this pawn. And so we have bishop takes c2, knight to c6. And as you can see, there's not really anywhere for the king to go. And you can't take here because you're going to be running into bishop check here, which does win the queen. And so you have bishop back to a4. And knight would come to d8. And yeah, you don't really have any way to defend against bishop coming here or the knight coming back over here and discovering a check on the king. So that is all she wrote. Going to the last one. This is well, I'm all the way back to the beginning. So this is the annihilation of defense. So generally that's a piece sacrifice on either a pawn complex or it's going to be on a piece. I kind of gave you the answer maybe. I don't know. Take a look at it, put it on the board, see how you like it. And I will see you guys in the next video. I appreciate it.